Um, I got in the habit of writing true stuff, partly because of the inspiration that Bob Duncan had given me. He says, you got to write. And he says, to write, you have to live. You have to go out and do things. And that's the inspiration behind all the adventures. The thing about the kind of adventuring that I've done is you run into the most extraordinary people. People don't, ordinary, average, run of the mill, go to the supermarket and that's all they ever do. People don't go on adventures like this. They just don't. You know, if somebody is really good and you know they're really good and they say, come with me, go with them.
Hmm. Sage advice.
For Love of Memoir is a place for people who have a passion for human stories. The ones we tell, the ones we carry, and the ones we're still trying to understand. Here, we talk with writers about their life-changing experiences and what it takes to bring those stories onto the page and into the world. Whether you simply love a good story or aspire to write your own, you're in the right place.
Hello, Chester.
Hello.
Welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, I'm very pleased to be here.
You have had quite the adventurous life, sir.
That's what people tell me. I don't, not having lived somebody else's life, I really don't see it from that point of view.
Oh, I guess that makes sense. When you're in it, you live it, right? Well, we are here to talk about your most recent memoir, The Trek Continues, More Memoirs from a Rocket Scientist. And kind of judging by the title, it would lead one to believe that it is a sequel, correct?
It is a sequel. It's the second book in a trilogy.
Okay.
Trilogy is already written, but it still needs to be edited, and it's a couple of years off.
Okay. All right. Well, I kind of like to kick it off by just having you maybe give us a summary about your book.
My books. I started out as a physics and engineering student, and I got met a fellow student. Her name was Judy Burns, and she graduated, and she was infatuated with this very strange TV program called Star Trek. This was back in the 1960s, and
Uh-huh.
so she decided that she wanted to meet and get to be friends with one of the characters in Star Trek. And that was Leonard Nimoy, who played Mr. Spock.
Yeah.
But Judy was a schemer. So she decided that the way to get to meet Leonard Nimoy was not to be a fan in a fan club, but to actually write a script for Star Trek and get it sold. So she tried to do that, and that was for the second season of Star Trek, and that didn't work out because second season went off the air. In the meantime, she inveigled me. I was a student. I didn't have At the time, I did not even have a television set, so I had no idea what Star Trek was all about. But she said, you got to watch these videotapes that I've made because I want to pick your brains because you know something about science and maybe we can do something here. So she sat me down and played a bunch of Star Trek videos, um, and they got into my head. And I have to tell you, one night I went to sleep and I had a dream. The dream put me on the um, command deck of the Enterprise. And that was bad enough, I suppose, being in that location. But everybody was scared to death. And the reason they were scared to death is because there was a ghost that was haunting the bridge of the Star Trek of the Enterprise
In your dream.
in my dream. Yeah. So I watched all of that and I said, people have interesting reactions. I wonder what that's all about. Why would they be so scared about a ghost? And then I woke up and, and I made some notes. I had a notepad next to my bed and I made some notes and went back to sleep. And I called Judy in the morning. I says, "You've been looking for a story idea. Here's an idea I had this dream last night." And I told her about the dream and the ghost, and she thought it was absolutely terrific. So she invited me to collaborate with her on writing a script for Star Trek. So that's how I got involved.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is when we ultimately saw it on the air, the actors were doing what I had something very similar to what I had actually visualized when I was actually writing the scene. So there was a little
Wild.
difference, but not a big disconnect.
Yeah.
I had
I want
really
to get
kept,
into what that experience was like, being able to witness your script come to life on the screen. But with regard to The Trek Continues, it's an
yeah,
amalgamation of essays, right? Personal essays.
yes,
And
that's
some
right.
of them are about your work on Star Trek, and then other ones are just about adventure, and some of them are about what sounds like your absolutely lovely wife, Sarah.
Well, Sarah is the spirit in all three of the books.
Mm,
Okay. Um, and it started with a tragedy. Yeah, I have to start there.
mm.
Um, Basically, what happened is I came home from work and Sarah got up from her chair and collapsed in front of me. Her heart had stopped. And
Wow.
of course, I immediately called 911, but the paramedics had managed to get her heart started, but about 10 minutes had elapsed. So I didn't really have any expectation that she would ever recover. Um, and the experience was absolutely devastating. She passed away officially the next day. But I went into the deepest of depression. Anybody who's had an experience like that understands.
Mm,
There's no words you can put to it. If you haven't had that kind of an experience, there's no way you can
mm,
understand what it's like. Some, you know, many people in the world have gone through the experience or will go through the experience, so they'll be able to understand what I was going through. So I managed to get through the funeral and everything, and I had, we had lots of friends, and they gave me as much comfort as it's possible to give. But what I've discovered, I actually I did something a little strange. Instead of moping around the house after Sarah was in the hospital and had passed away, I went back to work. I went back, I worked 50 miles away in one of the aerospace companies. And I went back to work, and everybody says, "What are you doing here?" And I says, "I got to be anywhere but in my house. I have to get away."
mm,
So I started writing the memorial for the memorial service, for the
mm,
memorial mass. And what I found was rather interesting. I found that my spirits were lifted by writing about Sarah and the experiences that she had had in her life.
mm.
She'd had a very interesting and very difficult life, and this is what a remarkable woman she was, which we can go into. Um, but that was an interesting observation, and I later on, after all of well, after she had been put in the ground and all the ceremonies and everything were over, and I had lapsed back into my depression. I thought about the way I had felt when I was writing about Sarah, and I realized I really needed to start writing. So I started writing some of the stories that she was familiar with and just started putting them down. Um, and at the time, I remember I'm just going to write a letter to Sarah. This story's going to be a letter. And she can, she'll read it wherever the heck she
Yeah.
is. And what I found was it was like climbing a stairway. Every new story took me one step higher. And eventually I'll get back to, you never get back to normality because your life is
Mm,
totally disrupted. But you get back to building a new life with new people and new experiences. And so I had a big pile of stories that I'd written, and I just kept writing them, couldn't stop writing. And Sarah was in every one of the stories. She was the spirit in the story. Um, so one day I went to a party and I ran into somebody who turned out to be a professional editor, and my dear friend now, Ina. And she says, well, send me a couple of stories. Let me read them. So I did. And she says, hey, these are really good stories. She says, this has got to go into a book. So the two of us teamed up, and that's how the first book came out.
Wow.
And it's nice being in the hands of an old pro, which she is.
Yeah.
She really makes things easy for you.
Yeah.
And so the book was a considerable success.
And
And
what was the name of the first one?
from the potato to Star Trek and beyond.
Mm.
I have a picture of it up here.
Yeah.
And so, that started me the process. And obviously, I have lots more stories. So I continued to write. And then the second book came, obviously, was on the table, ready to be edited. And then a third book, and the third book will finish the trilogy. So the thing about these stories is they are memoirs. They are all true stories, but they all stand alone. Each story can
Right.
be read completely independently in any order. There's no time sequence in these things. They're just stories, and um, and they're all true. Um, I got in the habit of writing true stuff, partly because of the inspiration that Bob Duncan had given me. He says, you got to write. And he says, to write, you have to live. You have to go out and do things. And that's the inspiration behind all the adventures that I've actually had. And
Yeah.
actually, Bob Duncan did this horrible thing and stuck it in my head that I had to go out and have adventures. So, so I did.
But look at all the adventures you've had as a result. And you have, and you cover a lot of things, at least in the Trek Continues, which is I have not read the
Yeah.
first one yet, but I have read the Trek Continues.
Oh, thank
And
you.
it's a number of different stories and different adventures from Star Trek to Sarah to all of your adventures in crazy places. What ties all these stories together for you?
Well, there was a period of time of several years after the Star Trek experience, which was 1968. Um, and I finished up in graduate school and went off to work in the aerospace industry and started collecting money and having time for a vacation after a couple of years. I decided to do something that I had wanted to do since I was a child, which was to take a boat through the Grand Canyon.
Mm.
So I did that, and that was in 1972, I believe, 72 or 73. And that was a life-changing experience. But there's a couple of things that happened in that excursion other than getting my life changed. Um, I kept a daily journal. It was the first time I'd ever kept a journal. And somewhere along the line during that trip, people wondered what I was writing every evening. And I says, oh, I'm just writing the day's events. And so people started asking me to read out the day's events around the campfire, which I did. Now, you have to be really honest when you're writing a journal like that, when people who read it were actually there the few hours before when the events actually
Yeah.
happened. So, so I became an honest writer. There's no fictions involved. Try and make it as honest and as straightforward as you possibly can, because you got the world's best critics right in front of you. They thought they were good stories. So I just kept doing it. And through all the adventures that I had afterwards, I kept writing the journal. So a lot of what's in all of the three books are, in fact, extracts from my daily journal. They were literally written within a couple of hours after the events being described. And so they're very fresh, very lively.
Which is why they're so
They're
vivid, I'm
on the
sure.
spot, and
Yeah.
for you can tell just how exciting some of those encounters really were.
Yeah,
So
like crocodile infested waters in the
things like
Amazon. What draws you to that adventure over and over?
well, the thing about the river experience, I was probably, it's hard to describe the way I was before I started doing all this, but I was probably a type AA type personality, very
Mm.
hard driven kind of guy. And that 2.5 weeks that I spent drifting down the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon just totally changed me. It's a life-changing experience. So you resonate with the canyon walls in a way that's impossible to describe, but certainly other people have written exactly the same thing. So I know it is a common experience. But I came out of that experience totally tranquilized. I was a very different person coming out.
Wow.
I still could drive pretty hard, but I had a sense of being able to just walk away from all of the cares of the world and just experience the world as it exists around me and just observe.
Why do you
Um,
think that is? What was it about the experience of floating through the Grand Canyon that gave you that?
I don't know, and different people react differently. Some years later, I got signed on. I signed on as a trainee boatman, and actually rode a boat through the Grand Canyon. And it was a training exercise, but we did pick up some passengers halfway through at Phantom Ranch. And one of the passengers that we picked up at Phantom Ranch had a psychotic reaction to the canyon. We actually had to have him helicoptered out.
Like he had a
Um,
nervous breakdown, like a mental
he
breakdown?
had a mental breakdown. So different people react different ways to that experience. Most everybody had an experience similar to mine, in talking with other people, and particularly the professional boatmen that do that every year. And they keep coming back for a very good reason. It's a hell of a very good place to be. It really is. But every once in a while you get these kind of reactions, and other boatmen have told me that as well.
So this is a relatively common, well-known phenomenon that people have
They
this,
get
it sounds almost like spiritual experience in the Grand
It's a
Canyon.
spiritual experience. For most people, it's a positive experience. Occasionally, it's a negative one, and I did witness the negative experience. So but for me, it was 100% positive, and I
Yeah.
got hooked. I mean,
Yeah, I
this
imagine.
was so much fun. I got to do this again and again
Imagine.
and again. And so I've done rivers from Alaska to Africa, and I've been trained as a boatman, running rivers. I've been trained as a kayaker, whitewater kayaker. So that's part of the adventure. I've done other things like backpacking in the Sierras and so on,
Mm,
backpacking in the Grand Canyon as well.
mm.
But river running really was my great outdoor adventure as an adult. As a young man, I was a surfer, and that was my
Okay.
outdoor adventure as a surfer. And I
You're
got
a
pretty good.
California boy, yeah?
So I'm a Southern California boy. I
Yeah,
tell you. Yeah, I spent a lot of time in the water.
I imagine. I imagine. You've said that your life was straight out of Star Trek. What do you mean by that?
Well, when I was a kid, I was a really good reader. I read a book a day. I had the gift to read extremely quickly. And my favorite reading, I read everything under the sun, but my favorite reading was science fiction.
Mm,
And I lived in Glendale, which had Glendale, Southern California, and they had a very good regional library. Basically, it was the primary library for San Fernando Valley. And I probably was about 7 or 8 years old when I made an arrangement with the head librarian at Glendale Library that I got first dibs on every science fiction book that came through the door. So as soon as a new book would come in, it would go to me, and
yeah.
then I would do a book review for the librarian, and the book would then go on the shelf for other people to read. So I did that all the way in through, well, for several years, probably into when I went off to college. I stopped doing that. So I grew up with science fiction in the golden age of science fiction.
Hmm.
That's when, the best of the science fiction stories were being written. And so it was natural for me to be involved with Star Trek. And it
Hmm.
was natural for me to shape my professional career into engineering and particularly into space-oriented engineering.
Right.
So
You are an actual rocket scientist, right?
I'm an actual rocket scientist, the real thing. Oh, well, now let me back off from that. I'm the real thing in the following sense that I have designed guidance systems for rockets. Okay, so that puts me in the club. But then I had the experience of working for 4 years with the guys that actually built the moon rockets,
Oh, wow.
the guys who actually built the rocket engines for the moon rockets. These were the real rocket scientists. And I mean, I'm looking up to those like a starstruck kid,
Sure.
And one of them in particular was Tom Coltis, became my friend and mentor. So I actually studied rocket engines and jet engines under the country's leading rocket engine designer, Tom Coltis. He was the guy who was the principal. He had the title of thermal management for the F-1 rocket engines for the Saturn rocket engine that took us to the moon. That's the most important engineering job in the Saturn rocket engine design. He
And you
later,
work directly with him?
I worked directly with him, sat next to his desk, and we worked together on stuff.
What an amazing experience.
Um,
I'm sure that was.
and then he was the chief designer of the space shuttle main engines. Um, and he was the Air Force's principal advisor for rocket propulsion. So this is the top rocket guy in the country,
Wow.
and he's the guy who taught me about rocket engines. And I worked with Tom for 4 years.
So
So
how does one go
so I'm in
from
the
rock?
club, but he is the club. He's the
Yeah,
president of
yes,
the
it
club.
sounds like it's that what an incredible experience. How did you go from rocket science and building rockets to writing and writing scripts for Star Trek
Well, the Star
and
Trek
floating the Grand
before all.
Canyon?
Well, the Star Trek and the Grand Canyon was all in front of that.
Yeah,
I wrote the Star Trek thing in my collaboration with Judy. I was a graduate student at the time,
before.
and she
Okay.
was a fresh graduate,
Yeah.
natural gifted writer.
Well, it sounds
And
like you have put yourself in some really good positions with people.
oh yeah, well, and that's the fortunate thing. So as an adventurer in the aerospace industry, of course, that's a high talent industry. There's buckets and buckets of really interesting people in that industry. But there are also some real geniuses,
Mm.
honest to God movers and shakers. I've mentioned Tom Coltis. He was one of those guys. But there were a number of other people that took me under their wing and became mentors. And I've had the privilege of writing stories about these extraordinary individuals that I've run into in the industry. So there are some really, for me, it's very gratifying to write their stories. Um, but their personalities live inside of me.
Sure.
My sense of having lived and been friends with these people for so many years. So that's a lot of the material that I have that I've put into the books, these stories about these extraordinarily gifted individuals.
Yeah.
Um, but along the way, I've run it. The thing about the kind of adventuring that I've done is you run into the most extraordinary people. People don't ordinary, average, run of the mill, go to the supermarket and that's all they ever do. People don't go on adventures like this. They just don't.
What is it that
People,
what do you think sets you apart? Because you're right. Most people go their entire lives without experiencing half of the stuff that you have experienced or meeting the people that put them on that path. What do you think the difference is?
well, with me, it was one thing with me, it was one thing led to another. In other words, I had a good experience and that was so much fun. I wanted to go do some more. So it was kind of like, it was sort of an addiction.
Okay.
It wasn't addictive in the sense of, like drugs or anything like that. It was just,
Sure.
boy, this was a good time. I want to have some more,
Yeah,
and,
you were
and, the,
receptive to new opportunities.
and the people that I meet in these adventures are really unusual people. And then, one day I'll be sitting along doing nothing much particularly, and I get a phone call. This happened for real. he said, "Hey, Chad," he says, "we're going to do a first descent of a river up in Idaho. Would you like to come along?" I said, "Sure." You only get to do a first descent once in your, on any particular river. There's only one first descent.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so, you go do a first descent and you get to meet all kinds of interesting new people in the process because the word gets around it's going to be a first descent. And that drags all of the interesting people out of the woodwork. And so, it's one thing leads to another is how the adventures actually happen. And then they eventually played out because of Sarah.
Mm.
Sarah walked into my life and I wasn't going to do any of those again. I was going to spend the rest of my life with Sarah, which turned out to be 20 years, 20 good years. Um, but I'll give you a sense of the spectrum of people. So there was one boatman when I was a trainee boatman. One of the boatmen was a guy who made his living just doing odd jobs for people, and he was literally penniless. He had to borrow his jacket for this particular excursion. He didn't even own a jacket that was warm enough because we were making the excursion in springtime and there was still snow on the ground and he didn't have something for that. So he was penniless, but what an interesting and fun guy to be with. We instantly became great friends. So that was on one excursion. So that's one end of the spectrum of people that I've run into. On another excursion, I was up in Alaska and there was a guy that was new on the trip. I was just running as a passenger. He was just another passenger on the trip. And we got to be acquainted over 3 or 4 or 5 days, something like that. Just got to be friends. When he had enough trust in me, he told me who he really was. He was a multi-billionaire.
Mm.
And then for several days, I got to get some insights into the life of a multi-billionaire. So I've covered that kind of extraordinarily broad spectrum of interesting people, from a penniless
Yeah.
person to a billionaire. And I haven't written about the billionaire other than to say he exists
Sure.
because that's his story. It's not mine. And obviously
Sure.
his privacy is important. But I've just run into the most interesting people. And, you've probably picked up a little bit of that in looking through some of the stuff that I've done.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Fascinating life.
so, threaded through three books are stories about people who are very much worth knowing.
Mm. Would you mind reading a piece or two for us?
Uh, yeah, I have to tell everybody that I once had a professional actor who lived next door to me here. Um, he was a character actor who specialized in playing bad guys, and he used to scare me to death when he put on his bad guy act. But he was, in other words, a very, very nice guy when he wasn't being an actor. But he could read a story, and he was a professional at that. I'm not a professional, so I will stumble my way through a couple of these stories, I think. So this is something that happened a long time ago, 1972. Have you ever heard a scream? I don't mean a fake Hollywood movie scream. I mean the real thing. A blood-curdling, hair-raising, gut-twisting howl of astonishment and terror. Well, I have. I heard it one night on a distant island. I'll start at the end. It was 1972. This was a long time ago, a time when people were worried about the Cold War. But on this trip, that was a very distant concern. Picture an undulating mirror that was the sea, a sea that quietly reflected the starry glory of a soft summer night. The ocean here was nestled within the protecting channel between Santa Rosa and Santa Cruz Islands. In the far distance was a sprinkle of dim sparks along the Santa Barbara coast. All around us were the other boats, a multitude of boats, their lights dancing slowly in the low swells. Sweet accordion harmonies and masculine songs enveloped us from all sides, for we were anchored in the midst of the myriad vessels of the Russian fishing fleet. For us, too, this was a night of celebration. It was our last night at sea. Sometime after midnight, we would start the long haul east and south to our final berth at Dana Point and then home. The morning would have its charms as well as we cruised along, escorted by a large pod of gray whales and a school of dolphins playing happily in our bow waves, wishing us bon voyage and good cheer.
Beautiful. Thank you for that.
I like that. Well, the story is goes on and on and on, of course. Um, but there's a sense I think I've captured with that little excerpt of what it's like to have had that experience of going through the Grand Canyon, because I think that captures the feeling that I had when I was in the
Yeah.
canyon.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of sensory texture in just that little piece. You say a lot in very few words.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Did you have another one you wanted to share?
Oh gosh, do I have another one? Okay.
Only if
So
you want to.
so we'll talk about Sarah.
Yeah, let's talk about Sarah.
I scroll down and get Sarah here. Oh, I went too far. Oh, there it is. Sarah and I were on our way to we were on our way to buy a new car. She had already decided on what it should be. Not long before a new sports car had been introduced on the market, and it had already developed an outstanding reputation. Sarah loved sports cars, and she insisted we go for a test drive. I was reluctant at the time because payments would be much higher than what we had been paying with the old car. But the old song goes, whatever Sarah wants, Sarah gets. The car salesman was most enthusiastic about this model. A tall, lanky man, he nevertheless was somehow able to shoehorn himself into the rather cramped rear seat, and we were off. I drove the car first. Winding up around the hills, I was very impressed with the car's performance and handling. But after a bit, Sarah insisted that it was her turn, so we exchanged places and were off again. One thing the salesman did not know about Sarah: the way to survive the experience of riding with her behind the wheel was to say a prayer, strive for the tranquility of Buddha, and leave your fate in the hands of God. Though I had driven the car hard around those hills, Sarah practically left them on fire. It's not that she was a dangerous driver, she wasn't, but her skills and habits, with her experience ranging from driving school buses to racing cars, were far beyond the norm. I once knew a famous astronaut, probably the best jet pilot of them all, who had a similar reputation behind the wheel, and people were extremely reluctant to ride with him as well. Nice car, she said when we arrived back at the showroom, tires squealing. Kind of reminds me of my old Porsche. As I got out of the car, I glanced back at the salesman. He was frozen in place, his hands grasping the convenience handles so tightly that the white bones of his knuckles seemed to almost burst through the skin. He finally emerged from the back seat, dripping with sweat, and proceeded to stagger a wavy line back into the building. The good thing is he was in no condition to drive a hard bargain.
Oh, I love it. What a fantastic story. She sounds like quite the character.
Oh, let me tell you about Sarah. Sarah was brilliant. I mean, intellectually brilliant. So she had three master's degrees. She had a master's degree in English literature, She had a master's degree in music. She was trained as a musician, as a singer. She was trained as an opera singer, and she sang with the Seattle Opera.
Wow.
And then she sang professionally when she came down to Southern California as well. She was also a psychotherapist, a licensed psychotherapist, and she was a specialist in criminal subjects. And I got to meet one of her subjects one day, one of her clients. He scared the death out of me. Boy, was he a scary guy. But she was absolutely fearless, and she had total dominance over these people. But there was more to than that. You have to picture Sarah. She was a beautiful woman. She was of Scotch-Irish descent. She was a strawberry blonde,
Mm.
and she was an American Indian. Now, how did she get to be an American Indian as a strawberry blonde from the old countries? Well, she was an anthropology major as an undergraduate, and she was doing some field work with the Nez Perce tribe up in the state of Idaho. And she was interviewing the tribal shaman, a lady named Ella. And Ella liked Sarah, so Ella took Sarah under her wing and trained her as a tribal shaman. And then apparently adopted Sarah into the tribe. I know Sarah was adopted into the tribe and became a member of the Nez Perce Indian tribe. So I married an Indian, but a strawberry blonde Indian.
Sounds like you two were a powerhouse.
We were an interesting couple.
I imagine. I imagine.
And you can imagine how devastating it was to lose this incredible creature. So, but this story and my little description of her background will give you some sense as to what an incredible woman this lady actually was.
Mm.
She was definitely out of the norm.
Yeah, sounds like it. I noticed a lot of your stories ended not necessarily in triumph, but in humility. And I'm interested to know, did you do that intentionally just to kind of
No,
show
it's
that
just no,
awe and
not in,
uncertainty can exist in the same
no,
place?
no, no, nothing like that. It's just when I got to the point where the story was finished, I finished.
How do you know when the story's finished?
It just feels like it's finished.
You feel like you can wrap a bow on it.
Leave it when it's finished.
Mm. Yeah, don't take it over the edge. It's a common mistake. It's one that I have to battle myself with frequently because feel the need to explain everything. And it's
Yeah.
not always necessary. It's not necessary to explain. You write about failures. What's one failure that taught you an important lesson?
Yeah, painful stuff sometimes. And I didn't want to do it, but my editor insisted that I write about this. So I never finished graduate school. Um, I got to the point where I was giving my doctoral dissertation presentation, and I screwed it up. And after some trauma after that, I walked away from graduate school, went to work full time, which turned out to be a really fortunate experience because it opened so many doors for me. The timing of when I walked away opened the doors for me. But there was one experience that I had when I first started graduate school. I went to a party with one of the young professors. Now, to set the scene, this was 1965, and I had been invited to be a charter student at the brand new university campus, University of California campus at UC Irvine. So I was one of both Judy and Burns and myself were among the very first students at the university. We were charter students.
Wow.
The way I met Judy, by the way, is we were both elected to write the student constitution. So
Wow.
Judy ran the conservative faction on the Constitution Committee. I ran the liberal faction on the Constitution Committee, and the two of us wrote the Constitution together. You know, it was Judy's words and mine. that put the student government together. And it's still, the Constitution's still
That's
good
incredible.
after 60 some odd years. So, um, where was I going with it? Oh, yeah. So it was brand new university, and all the faculty is new. Everybody's come from someplace else. And I got to a party at Alexei Maradudin's house. He was a young physics professor
Mm.
who he had to have already been tenured, given what happened in the years subsequent. So Maradudin and I got into a conversation about aesthetic stuff, art history, and reactions to artworks of various kinds. And he said something that he really liked. There was an art thing that he really liked, and I didn't particularly like it. So I made a comment that was kind of negative about something that he really liked. And his reaction was really negative. So I was in very bad graces with this professor. I had to take a class from him too. So, so what I didn't understand as a young person is that graduate school is not about students and it's not about learning. It's about politics. The learning that the classroom learning that you have in graduate school is incidental to what you really learn in graduate school, which is how you deal with these thorny characters who are already established professors. And
Mm.
some of those are good guys and some of them are bad guys. And you just have to learn that this is a jungle and it's probably more dangerous to people's careers than anything you run into on a river in Africa. So I had offended the professor who is going to be my math physics teacher, which is an absolutely critical course. Well, what do I do? Well, okay, so I take the course and I take it seriously, and I do well in the course. I basically said, okay, I'm going to show this professor that I can actually do the work and succeed at all this, so which I did. And but Maradudin always had this sneer when we would meet each other in the hallway. His facial expression I always interpreted as a sneer. Well, then as I got to the point where I had to take my PhD qualifying exam, and there's a story about what a screw up that really what turned out to be. Anyway, I passed the exam and I failed it, and it's all very technical, but I was going to be shown the door, and that was the thing. But what happened, and I tell it in the details in the story, it turned out that behind the scenes, my greatest champion, the guy who was working the hardest to get me through, was Maradudin, the person I had thought was my mortal enemy on the faculty. And when I was told that, I was so terribly embarrassed that it had been entirely my misobservation of Maradudin. It was my screw up.
The
And
assumptions we make, huh?
and I had learned so very much. It turned out to work out very well for me
Mhm.
because I went over to engineering and I absolutely needed to get the experience in engineering to have the career that I wanted to have. So it all worked out wonderfully well for me in the end. But that sense of embarrassment, um, it's something I've carried with me for the rest of my life. I've been much more careful in evaluating other people's and their reactions because what the reactions are may not be the other person. It may be me. By the way, Maradudin became very, very successful. He later became the chairman of the physics department and had an enormously successful career in the entire university system.
Mm.
So while I knew him at the beginning of his professorial career, he ended up having a very, very distinguished career within the university system. But the whole thing is a very interesting story because it gives you a sense of what this brand new university with the clash of personalities because these faculty members were coming from all over the country
Mm.
and they didn't meld together. They jarred. There was a lot of conflict in the within the physics department, which I write about. I write about that
Mhm.
conflict and how it ultimately works out. It works out for the physics department. It became a very good department after a while. And I think that it became a very good department because Meriden took it over and straightened it out.
Mm.
So kudos to that very, very good man. And I do wish that I hadn't made the mistake that I made of misreading him.
Mm. Well, did he know that you misread him, or was that just something that you carried on your own?
Uh, I just carried it on I never didn't have any further interactions. I had been working for Johnny Pelham at the time. Johnny
Hmm.
Pelham was a very famous experimental physicist, and I was working in his lab. And it was Johnny Pelham that told me what had gone on behind the scenes and how
Mm.
much Meriden had been my champion behind the scenes. But I had no further contact with Meriden after that. So um, it's it was a painful experience to go through, but
Mm.
it's learning is often a very painful experience.
Uh-huh.
And you
Especially the
learn
best lessons.
yeah, you learn a hell of a lot more from failure than you learn from success.
Always. Yep.
And the one thing about engineering, most people don't realize this, but it is an absolute truism. Nothing ever works right the first time in engineering.
Sure.
Engineering, yeah, engineering is a process of, you do your best, you come up with your best designs. Things don't work out the way you expect. So then you get good at diagnosing. A good engineer is a good diagnostic expert. So you learn from the failures, not from the successes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's life too, right?
I think it's true. Well, you can learn one of two ways. You can be defeated by your failure, or you can be enriched by your failure.
Well, you're going to learn no matter what, but
You're
how
going to
you
learn one
apply
way
it
or the
and what
other.
you
Yeah.
do.
But
Exactly.
but it's how you react to that experience.
Hmm.
So I've had bad experience since. Obviously, when Sarah died, that was a terrible
Mm.
experience. And I've had bad experiences since. I a few years ago, I nearly died, came within a whisper of dying from a really brutal heart attack. Um, and I learned from that experience as well. And I've written about that in the third book, and that should be entertaining to people, what it's like to go through that kind of an experience, because it is an
Yeah.
interesting experience. Um, so life is going to throw these things at you,
Hmm.
and it doesn't matter who you are. You're going to run into these things, and
True.
how you handle the aftermath is really uh, who you are. You can be enriched by the most brutal experience, or you can be just absolutely destroyed by it,
Hmm.
or you can be somewhere in between. Always
Absolutely.
carry a grudge, but keep on going.
Yeah. And a lot of people do. You also said that losing Sarah taught you a valuable lesson. What was that?
I, I'm not sure what lessons I've learned from Sarah. I guess one of the lessons is that she's always there.
Mm.
It's like she never left. Yeah, I know there's stuff that's in the ground now, but
Mhm.
the sense I have is that she's always in the next room. She's always just about ready to walk around the corner and start talking to me. Um, so she's just part of everything that I do now.
Yeah.
I've rearranged some of the house, put some different stuff on the walls and whatever, but an awful lot of the house is exactly the way she was. The houses would be familiar to her if she walked in the front door, and she would probably be pleased with the changes that I've made. You know,
She lives through you.
so I still have her spirit captured in the important things in the house,
Yeah.
and live with those things. So there's still a sense that she's still in the house and she's still around. She's inside of me, of course.
Yeah.
She's, um, I, there's a way I can describe what it's like. You know, when you become that close to somebody, you basically become fused together. You become a single individual.
Yeah.
You're two parts of a single entity. And so when one of that parts, one of those parts goes away, it's like taking a sharp sword and just literally slicing you down the middle
Mm.
and casting away half of you. The interesting thing, people talk about, they lose a hand or an arm, and then they have a ghost arm. They still feel like they have that
And
arm
feel it.
there, but it's
Yeah.
not there. They still feel it. It's in their brain, of course.
Yeah.
And that's the way I feel about Sarah. She's still that half of me, and she's
Mm.
still there, but it's that ghost thing. I can reach out, and it's like the person with the missing arm. He can reach out to touch something, but it's not there to touch. Um, so that's the kind of feeling that I have with respect to Sarah.
That's the kind of love that people aspire to because Sarah's been dead for quite some time, right? She's been gone for quite a
She's
while.
been gone 19 years.
Hmm.
That's obviously my life was completely reshaped as well. For one thing, all the writing I've done is a result of my encounter with her end and
Hmm.
how I recovered from that. So everything involved in publishing these books, I've published a lot of essays, and that's part of it too, the essays that I've published. Um, that all came from the tragedy. I would
Hmm.
have done none of those things if the tragedy happened to me. So there's good that came out of the dark.
Yeah. There always
And
is if we create space for it. And that sounds to me like she wouldn't have wanted it any other way.
eh, I think she would have preferred to stick around for another 20 years.
Yes. But I mean, if she had to depart this planet, she wouldn't have wanted you to live any other way.
I'm sure. Yeah, well, I have that sense, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right about that. But no, I mean, just I've been very privileged. I, I'm going on 84. I'll be 84 in a month, and I have memories that go back to before I was 1 year old. In fact, in the first book I actually wrote a story about viewing the world as a child, as a very young child, starting as an infant, and then through the first few years of my life.
Yeah, you have like a superior historical memory, right? Like you remember
I,
most days.
if I want to, I could remember everything.
Wow.
Now, obviously, there's some distortions that have crept in,
Sure.
but basically, I can put myself back in any given situation. I can put myself back in the scenes in high school or elementary school. Um, which means all those horrible things that happened to me in the past are still there. I
Of course.
can't go away from them, but I can put them aside and not let them worry me anymore. Write a
Sure.
story about them.
So
But
are
yeah,
you
I have.
able to identify what happened on specific, is it eidetic? Like, are you able to
No, I'm not
identify?
eidetic.
Okay.
No. There's a book I read called the Memory of the or the Mind of the Mnemonist, and it was written by a Russian psychologist named Luria,
Hmm.
A.R. Luria. Very famous case. This was back in the 1930s and 1920s and 30. This guy came to Luria and he says, "I've got a problem." And he says, "Can you fix the problem for me?" And Luria says, "What's your problem?" And the guy says, "I can remember everything, literally everything, moment by moment through my entire life." He says, "And it's driving me absolutely crazy." And the book is about that, about how Luria worked with this guy to try and get him to learn how to forget.
That's incredible. Could you imagine like the cobwebs you would have to sift through just to get through your day?
Yeah,
How
literally
fascinating.
everything,
Yeah. That's
moment by moment. So it tells me something interesting. All of that is stuck in your head somewhere.
Of course it is. Yeah, of course
Um,
it is. Just most of
because
us push
if
it
it was,
back so that we can
if
deal
it,
with what's in front of us,
yeah,
right?
and in the book Luria, they did some tests and he really did remember everything, literally, moment by moment. So it's in
I've seen
there,
people like on TV shows and documentaries that you can give them a date and they will tell you the day of the week, exactly what happened in terms of current events,
Yep.
anything major that happened. It's remarkable.
Yeah, but in the case of the mnemonist, it's literally like he knew exactly where his hand was and how rotated the fingers were and all the rest of that. Um, so that's stuck in your head someplace, or it's
Yeah.
stuck in the spirit world someplace, and you're
Hmm.
retrieving that moment, you know. So I have pretty good memories, but thank God I don't have those kind of memories,
Right,
you know.
man. The amount of stuff we don't know, the amount of stuff that we don't understand in this life. Well, Chester, a lot of my audience are people who are aspiring memoirists, or people who um, are considering writing, putting together a memoir, but just haven't started. What advice would you give people like that?
Well, I think it's probably going to be different for everyone, but the best thing is just write.
Hmm.
The way I do it is probably could be helpful for other people. When I am writing a story, I visualize that there's someone sitting in front of me and I'm just telling them the story directly.
Mm,
I'm not writing as a writer. I'm
storytelling.
writing down the words as I'm telling a story.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a storytelling experience. And I think what that does is it involves you. In my case, I'm reliving an experience.
Hmm.
And so I'm just writing down what I once lived. I have good memories, and I you can kind of capture. I'm obviously the minute details are going to be different than what actually happened, but they're going to be
Sure.
pretty close. The basic message is going to be there and accurate. Um, so I just tell a story about what happened. Oh, we were sitting around uh, looking at these hippos one day, and this hippo came up and did this funny thing, and so I tell a story about that, and I just write the words down. The other thing, so the fundamental thing is you just write,
Hmm.
and you don't worry about how good or bad it is. You just
I agree.
put the words down, and then you walk away because just walking away for a day or two, or even a few minutes, or a week or a month or whatever, and you come back and read it, you see what's wrong with it, what you had
Hmm.
written. You see what's good about what you've written, and
Yeah.
you see what's wrong with what you've written.
Yep.
And you start to make corrections and cleaning the story up. So the first draft is never what you want to publish. It's
Hmm.
what you want to do to get those ideas down and some
Yeah.
sort of just
I
capture
call
the
it
ideas.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I call it final draft paralysis. And I think that a lot of people, I mean, beyond journaling and beyond just writing for yourself, if you're looking to publish something or even just leave something for your family, but your intention is for others to read
Yeah,
it. I think a lot of times people are absolutely paralyzed by wanting to turn out a final product in their first draft. And nobody does that.
you cannot do that.
Nobody does
Absolutely
that.
can. And then if you're lucky, you'll get yourself a good editor.
That's right.
And I will have screaming and shouting matches over a single word. We'll argue for an hour or more over a word.
Yep. I've
And
also
then
heard
it'll turn
authors
out
say,
it's not the word that's the problem. It's what happened in the sentence before that. And we fix that sentence
sure.
and the word stays in place and everything is fine. You know,
Sure.
you
I've
know,
also heard authors say that picking an editor is really boils down to who you can argue best with.
yeah. Well, I've been very lucky in that respect. Obviously, we've become extremely good friends, but no, the idea, your first draft is to get the ideas down,
Yeah.
and you don't even have to get them in the right sequence. You just get
Yep.
the ideas down. My style of writing, which comes from my experience with working with Judy and having to write scenes as modules, as standalone modules.
Hmm.
Because if you look at any movie or any television show, it's a bunch of standalone scenes that are obviously mixed in different orders, different orders. So that's the way I write. I write modular. Um, so I write each paragraph is a single idea, basically. And whether I'm writing a story or an essay or anything like that, each paragraph is an idea. And in the end, I can go back and look at it and say, well, it's an interesting sequence of ideas, but it's the wrong sequence. And I'll just move the paragraphs around.
Hmm. Yeah, it'll come to you. As long as you get it down, the flow and everything else will come to you, along with all of the details. Each time you give it another pass over, you'll add a little bit more, or take away a little bit more, or change a little bit more.
Yeah,
And like you said, sometimes even change the sequence. It'll
right.
come to you. You just got to write.
And the other thing is, there's an expression which I ran into years ago, and I think it's an absolutely true one. A work of art is never finished, it's abandoned.
This is true. This is true. That is a
Yeah.
true statement. When you come, like, just like what we were talking about earlier, when you come to the end, you just end it.
Yeah.
Yep. What do you think Star Trek contributed to the world in your point of view?
Oh, I got to tell you about that. I had an interview. There's a guy who was doing a documentary about the few remaining participants in the original Star Trek. And so I was called down to Hollywood to be a participant and then be interviewed. And I had a wonderful insight while I was being interviewed. And the insight is this: when we were doing the Star Trek, we were doing a TV program. That's all we were doing. Judy and I were having some fun. We were making some money, good money, by the way, paid
I
for a
bet.
couple of years of graduate school. Um, Made Judy's career. Uh, but we were doing a TV show, and Fred Freiberger and Bobby Justman, all those people, they were doing a TV show. They were not out to change the world. Nobody was doing anything like, but hey, we got to put some stuff on the air in the fall. Let's go to work. What happened, and the insight I had when I was being interviewed was really interesting. We didn't change the world. We who worked on Star Trek. The people, but the world clearly changed. I mean, Star Trek is a big deal. 50 years later, it's a big
Yeah.
deal. 60 years later,
Hmm.
almost 60 years now. I mean, there's no question at all that the world is a different place than it would have been if there hadn't been a Star Trek. So what happened? What happened was the fan community. The fans got together, found that there were a whole bunch of them. I mean, a really large number of them. And it was the fans who collectively changed the world by insisting on, first of all, reviving Star Trek and then pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and expanding it. So that now Star Trek has literally changed the culture of the world. But it isn't, the actors and the writers and everybody who've contributed to that have all contributed to that change. And Judy and I contributed to that change. But it was really the collective momentum generated by the fan community that changed the world. And that's an
How
interesting,
so?
well, just by continuing to insist that Star Trek not go away.
Okay.
Okay. That continued pressure. It's like if you put, well, I don't know if you've done any boating, but if you got a really big boat in the water, okay, if you push it a little bit, it doesn't go anywhere. If you keep pushing it a little bit, it goes somewhere.
Hmm.
And eventually it picks up speed and starts going
Yeah.
pretty fast. Okay. Um, and that's basically what the Star Trek fan community did. They kept pushing on it, and the Star Trek kept developing momentum until it literally changed the world around it.
So are we living the future that Star Trek once envisioned?
We're living in the Star Trek future.
Yeah.
Um, give you some example. So we went to the moon. And as I mentioned, I was fortunate to have friends that were primary people in making that happen. But then it died. You know, basically, the going to the moon was a way of, instead of fighting the Russians on the battlefield, we fought the Russians in space by going to
Mm-hmm.
the moon. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It was a kind of war. Once we had done that, we had won the war. The government lost interest in space. So we went to the moon 4 or 5 times, and then we still had another bunch of times where the rockets were sitting ready to go, and the government pulled the plug on them. We just didn't go any further. So the enterprise of going into space was dead as a political issue. And it's the Star Trek community that revived that and
Mm-hmm.
insisted that the government pay attention.
Yeah. Collectively changing the world, those Trekkies.
Yes.
What do you hope readers will take away from The Trek Continues?
The world is an interesting place and there's a lot of interesting stories. But most importantly, there are a lot of interesting people in the world.
Mm.
There are some hazards in the world. And if you're willing to face those hazards, you can grow enormously as a result of having come through the experience alive and looking back on the experience in a positive way. But the most important thing is the world is full of interesting people. It really and truly is. There's what, 4 billion people in the world? I'm not sure. Every one of them's got a story, and every one of them's got an interesting story, some negative, some positive, most of them positive, but everyone's got a story to tell.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I think everybody's got a memoir in them somewhere. I also think too, just in talking to you, Chester, that a lot of a lot of a lot of your opportunity in life for all of these different adventures and excursions has started with a mindset. It's been my experience that challenge often comes or opportunity rather often comes disguised as challenge. And you look at it that way.
Yeah.
You know that some things are going to be hard and some things are scary, but you do it anyway.
Oh, you've got to take risk.
Yeah.
But everybody takes a risk. If you take a new job, there's a risk involved in that.
Yep.
When you get married, that sure is a risk.
There's a risk in getting
And
in your car and
that
driving
is
to the
an
office.
that is an adventure that a lot of people go through. Not everybody, but
Yeah.
almost everybody goes through that
Yeah.
adventure and the risks involved in that. So you have to be willing to take some risks. Now, the risks are not always physical. I've taken physical risks, and I've gotten through them. And it's been a couple of very near things, as you know. But every one of those encounters that I've had has enriched my life. So
Mhm.
I've been very blessed in that respect. The other thing is there's a certain amount of luck involved. And there's other people who see things in you that you don't see in yourself. So I have had the privilege a number of times in my career that people went out of their way to open doors for me.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so as I've written in my memoirs, people have opened the doors, and I've become the apprentice to some very great people.
Yeah.
And I've been very lucky, but I think it's because those very great people saw something in me that they wanted me to be their apprentice.
That's
They
right.
adopted me.
That's right.
Um, and it's partly because I was willing to take risks. Obviously, I'm reasonably intelligent, and that has something to do with it. I am more than reasonably creative, and
Yeah.
that probably had something to do with it. But you know, if somebody is really good, and they're really good, and they say, "Come with me," go with them.
Mhm. Sage advice. Sounds like it's a pretty amazing script you've written for your life.
Yeah, and hopefully there's a few more things to come from it. I'm
Absolutely.
certainly having these adventures, talking with you, Aaron. is an adventure. I have to tell you, every one of these podcasts, I'm always a little nervous of going into them. I suspect most people that you've interviewed have had that experience, but
Yep. I'm still nervous every time I start one.
yeah, because you never know how it's going to come out.
Yep.
It's an unknown thing. The podcast is an adventure for the participants, and so I'm having adventures of those sorts these days.
Yeah.
And I'm getting the reaction from the books. The feedback I've gotten has been 100% positive, by the way.
I would hope so.
And then I have other talents. I've been posting photographs on the web, and
I noticed that on your page. Yes, I've had a couple of them
and,
have
I,
come across my feed.
and I'm getting lots of very positive responses to the
Yeah.
photographs. So, maybe there's a couple of books coming out of those as well. And I've written enough essays now that I have at least a book in compiling the essays, and I have new essays coming out that I've just put aside for now. But
And you just keep creating. So
I
where can
just,
people find you and where can they get a copy?
well, I do have a website. It's one word, chesterlrichards.com. And then I have a Twitter X site, and I have a Facebook site, and some other things. If you have links to those, I'd appreciate if you'd put those on.
Absolutely.
I don't have them in front of me. Some of the link addresses are complicated. I don't remember the
No,
link.
I've got it all. Don't worry about
Yeah,
it. I'll put
yeah,
them all in the show notes.
but there are other interviews that I've had that people can look into. There's some bits and pieces of stories that I've written
Mhm.
that people can at least find them as teasers to get involved, to get intrigued with. And then there are the books. The books are available on Amazon. They're available on Barnes and Noble as well. And if I encourage people, if they read the books or part of the books, please write a review. Write a negative review if you feel like it.
Mhm.
Write a positive review. Either kind of review is welcome. So far, I've been lucky. I've gotten nothing but 4 and 5 star reviews. So no negatives, no 3 stars. People seem to like what they're reading,
Yep.
and that pleases me. It means that I'm doing something good for other people.
You absolutely are. Your stories are very entertaining and heartfelt and warm and adventurous
And true.
and true. Completely true. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks again so much for taking time to talk to me today.
Well, it's been my pleasure too. I've so very much enjoyed being here and having a chance to meet you and chat with you.
Oh, I'm
Thank
happy
you,
to hear it.
Aaron.
Maybe we'll do it again when your third one comes out.
I hope so. I really do.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's it for today's episode of For Love of Memoir. Thanks for listening. If something in this conversation moved you, I'd be so grateful if you'd follow the show, leave a comment, or share it with someone you care about. Those small actions tell the algorithm that our content matters so we can reach more memoir lovers like you.